Hi there guys, welcome to this quick tutorial, kind of like a basics tutorial, just showing people how you go around prepping metal, plastic and Finecast models. Thank you very much guys. Please like, share, subscribe if you do enjoy the content. In today's just a quick sort of basics tutorial, just showing people how to prep certain model types. The plastic ones I've kind of done before, but they're definitely Finecast can be a bit of a thing, and metal can be very much of a thing. Weirdly, all three of these formats are available in the Commissar Yarrick model. So as you can see, we've got all three variants of model in front of us. This is a very unique situation where all three formats are available in one particular model type. The classic sort of, well, I'm saying classic, it is classic I suppose, but it is to me quite new, the way that Games Workshop do a lot of their plastics. They've been doing it for a good 10 plus years now, so it's not something that's old. I did manage to pick these two up when Workshop was doing the classics kind of rehashed reprint range, and I just thought, yeah, go ahead, grab yourself a metal Yarrick and a resin Yarrick. This is well before the plastic Yarrick came out, and then Yarrick didn't exist in 10th edition. Near enough. I was very disappointed. Hence why they stayed in their packet, because I didn't really consider it a priority to paint them while he was squirreled away. All three formats do kind of work differently when you are prepping the models, when you are cleaning the models, and when you are assembling the models. Finecast is more of a resin than it is any form of plastic. It's a very soft resin. It's not very good, if I'm honest with you. It was some of the worst dark days of Games Workshop when they shifted from metal to Finecast. Those Finecast models were not good. Some of the models that I have now with Finecast are still bending. It's horrendous to use, but thankfully, with it being a Finecast model, you don't really need to do what you do with Forge World models, which I'll do a different tutorial on. With Forge World models, you need to kind of clean up to make sure that they don't have any release agent on there, because then that can mess up your painting. You can still mess up your painting even after you think you've got rid of the release agent, so you really do need to give them a good scrub. But thankfully with Finecast, I've never had any of those particular problems. Getting the models out, as you can see, the metal one does not require you to actually clip itself away. The banner pole is slightly bent, but it's metal, so you can just bend it back into place. This is the typical what's called white metal. Some of the earlier models, I do have some of the earlier models as well that were made out of the old lead or lead composite. This white metal was more of a tin. It was effectively the same thing, but it had a greater shininess to it than it did there with the original sort of like lead models, but that was always fine. Plastics, a lot of people know how to use plastics. You clip them out, you trim it down, you get rid of the mold lines, and jobs are good. You do get sort of like casting lines, which I'll show you more of a close-up in a moment, with both of the other formats. As you can see from here, you're kind of getting a weirdness, and you do kind of get what's called flash on the metal models, which does need cleaning up before we proceed. So now I'm just going to show you a little bit of the workstation that I'm currently working with while messing out with this metal model. So I've got my good clippers. I've got some old clippers that I've lost the snip of it between them. But these clippers are for kind of like grunt work. I don't really want to do grunt work with this, because there's some really big metal bits you can kind of chip. Some softer clippers. And then I've got various different sanding tools. So these are actually from MIG Ammo. They are sort of tapered sanding sticks. I quite like using them. The different grades right up to fine, and of course quite heavy and coarse. I'll probably end up needing more of the heavy coarse ones during this particular process. So we're going to get rid of the flash on the model. Now what we mean by flash on the model is the elements of the casting process where the metal is kind of poured out while the molds have been pressing together and the hot metal have been pouring in. I'm going to get a craft knife to help out with some of this as well, some of the scoring, and it's more evident on here, so it's more evident on the back banner. So if you have a look at the back banner, when you're looking at the actual model itself, can you see how there is a purity seal here, and we've got this huge bit of metal sticking off out of the purity seal. Same when we look at the skull kind of backpack. I'll try and focus that in a bit more. There we are. And we've got this huge lump of metal. That'll be a channel that's coming in, that'll taper, and then of course go into the actual mold press itself while it's actually being pressed together, and then of course creating the model. If you ever wondered why a lot of the older models were kind of very monopause, not the camera, sorry, very monopause, everyone with an arm at the side and then sticking up, you can probably see a tiny bit of a mold line running up there, because these were two halves. And it was a lot easier doing that with a model than it was having an excessive pause, simply because it was just a lot easier to be able to get the model to be together. So what we're going to do, we're going to get the old clippers and we're going to kind of start snipping off some of these bits of flash. And can you see that some of the feet there? Making sure that these are coming off on the actual bit slaughter base area as well. It's quite a few. It's been a while since I've done a metal figure, so just trying to remember how to do this. There we are. You'll notice a lot more when you actually start going through it. You will notice quite a few of the pieces that have flash on them, and of course the big bit. If you decide that you want to get rid of that, just make sure that you really go in there and cut it away. Sometimes it's better to cut away close to it to make sure that you're not knocking off any detail, and then yeah, I thought that we're going to snip off and fly away like an eagle. Evidently it did not. Right, come on. Now I've cleaned up the model to the best of my ability. I'm going to straighten out this banner pull simply by bending it. Look at that. Solid and rigid. Now if I've missed anything, I do apologise. I think I may have. I think there might be a bit there that's been missed. Come on, Paul, let's crack on and grab it. And I'm kind of going to get the 120 to quite coarse file, and I'm just going to run it across some of the bits where we have cut off the model, and that is just filed down. Now I also actually have a metal file specifically for this, because it's sometimes you need to. Make sure you've got a mask on, kids. I'm going for a coarse one because it is metal, so it kind of needs that little bit extra grunt to get through. The plastic ones you can kind of use a lot lighter. And then we check on here. We're also going to try and get rid of any mold lines, and at mold lines we're going to have to use a file using the back of the knife. Sorry if the camera keeps shaking. Using the back of a knife is not cracking on anything like this. We've got mold lines there. Sometimes you can have models that are really cast crap, very different. And you can see all the silver that's coming away on the actual hand. And I keep finding bits of flash, and you do. So that's another good reason just to sort of go over it with a file, because you will find bits that are just like, oh, I'm sure I got rid of that. No, you didn't. And you're also trying to make sure there's no spiky pieces. I have stabbed myself, I don't know how many times, because of spiky pieces I bet the camera's shaking like mad, so I do apologise. And then making sure that just underneath the feet. There we are. So I'll probably tidy him up a little bit more. Try and straighten out that his bolt gun, which is now a stone bolter. There we are. And then we're going to try and fit him into his slaughter base. So Yarrick came with a very standard Games Workshop slaughter base. This one's a 2005. And you kind of just push it in and voila. And every now and again you might get gaps. So if you see that there, you've actually got a bit of a gap. If that occurs, don't worry about it. Just fill it with your basing material. So to make sure that this is all going to stick, we need super glue. Because you cannot use, of course, plastic glue on this. Because plastic glue is plastic glue. I've just got some cheapo super glue. Because I don't use a lot of super glue in my miniature building. Now, thankfully, he's got feet. So I am going to actually add the super glue to the feet. If you want to use an activator, you can do. I prefer just to, I suppose, because I don't use super glue that much. Sometimes I put a little bit. I put a tiny bit, as you can see, on that sort of little strip for the base. And then we're just going to slot him in. And we're going to give him a minute to dry. And then we're going to, of course, stick his backpack on. But with the backpack, I'm going to put the glue in. If you've got activator, fantastic. If you haven't, just put the glue in. Make sure it's going to just kind of sit for a minute and let air. You're going to hear a weird noise because if you're using super glue, I always like to tap the bottle as it clears the nozzle. Just making sure that you're not going to bung it up. Also having a really old needle for your airbrush. An old needle for the airbrush is really good at actually clearing that out. Now super glue tends to sort of stick quite quick. This for some reason isn't, probably because it's crap. And I'm just going to stick it onto his back. And then again, using activator, you do that. I can also just stick it onto his back and then hold it for a minute or two and we should be good. So the next one we're going to resolve is the one that I actually probably hate the most. It's going to be the Finecast model. And I hate the Finecast model because even though you've got a lot of channels, a lot, it's kind of like flash and stuff like that on the metal figure, these are terrible. They're always terrible. And they always, as you can see, there's a hell of a lot of connection points. Some of the connection points are going to require me to actually go around very carefully with a craft knife. So what I'm going to do is to get my good snippers. And I'm going to snip away. I'm going to be as close as I can, but not too close, because you might accidentally get rid of some detail. It doesn't even sound great when you're getting rid of it. Right. And that's all we're doing, really, is to clip it away. And if you can see, it's very delicate, because these channels are very small. So it's come off, that's fine. That's already been broken away. Let's get him off there. Let's get his little sash off there. Now, can you see how that broke away? Sometimes that will happen. Don't worry about it. I managed to clip quite close to that. Right, and then I'm going to, again, just try and, that's shot off into the distance. I'll never see that again. So there's a lot when it comes to this Finecast. There's a lot that you've got to do now. I'm clipping this bit off here. I'm doing it very slowly because I don't want it to shoot off. I also don't want it to shatter anything else on the underneath because it can do that. It has a very low tolerance point. It's not great. Now, thankfully, Yarrick's claw on this one is not very rounded. It's quite square. So we're kind of trimming off all the additions that we can find. And then, like that there, just using the side of the blade to try and straighten it up as the best we possibly can. Right, now onto the main model. Sorry, all that may have been underneath my thumb. This here, yeah, we've got lots to do. So again, gently, very slowly peeling it off. That one wasn't gently or slowly, that shot out. And then sometimes you've got these little bits here. And those bits, you're not going to get them with some clippers. You really are going to have to come in there with your knife gently and kind of push into the resin. And make sure your knife is razor sharp, because you can slip quite easy on this stuff and you don't want it going into your hand. If you can cut away from yourself, you can do, but I always find if you cut, which is wrong a little bit, but if you cut towards yourself, you end up with a better purchase. Yeah, I've never been a fan, but right, now we've got all these to sort out. If you're hearing this pulse, speed this bit up. Sometimes what you might need to do, genuinely, if you think, is that part, I mean, that there, the casting there is terrible. Absolutely horrendous. Just have a look at the actual model itself to see whether or not you can see anything. It's supposed to be, in there, there's supposed to be like a little tiny bit on top of the stone bolter, like a little lip. There's no way on God's green earth I'm going to be able to find that. That is awful. Okay, so we started doing some of the shaving. I've actually gone to the 320. You can see right there. And we're just kind of doing a little bit of shaving on the old feet, just to make sure they're all nice flat. And they're going to fit into the slot base. Wow, look at that, Games Workshop. Copyright 2000. Wow, that's amazing. That's probably because this figure was initially metal. Now, you might get some resin dust everywhere. I do recommend kind of like making sure that it's completely blonde. If you've got an airbrush, brilliant. If not, just blow on it. Sounds stupid, but just do that. So, I've just used my airbrush to try and clean it up as best as I can, making sure there's no powder or dust there. And again, we're going to be going for super glue to be able to assemble this model. I'm going to put the model onto the base to begin with. Just using, sorry about my airbrush noise there. Thought I'd turned you off. There we go. And again, I'm just going to put a little bit there on the actual base itself. So that fits in quite nicely. I'm going to do the same as what I did before by putting a little tiny dot into there. Activator, fantastic. Again, I'm not using it. I'm also not using it because if you're a beginner, then you're probably not going to have activator. You might just have the cheapest glue available from your local hobby store. Now, need to make sure that these are going to fit. You might find, because I've actually just looked at this, that's a little bit wonky. Those claws might not. There we go. And it's sash time. And I've got my glove stuck to it. Right. So that's the second one assembled. Now, those two were pretty easy to do. The plastic one is going to take a lot more doing. So the plastic one, of course, is a multi-part kit coming with a very ornate looking base, which I might leave off. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that just yet. And it comes with an 8-part instruction manual to be able to actually get him constructed and then painted. However, I am going to be doing a lot of the work on Yarrick off the, well, not essentially off the model, but I'm going to be doing it in sub-assemblies so I can actually paint it easier. The reason I didn't do that with the other guys is that they are so kind of flat, kind of like pose with the left and right arms going at the side. I don't really need to do that. This one, I suppose I don't really need to do that on this one. However, is a little more fancy when it comes to his cape, his billowing cloak, etc., etc. So I am going to want to actually make sure that this guy gets a proper, because it is Yarrick, I'm going to make sure that he gets a proper scene too, as it were. That sounds wrong and rude. But trying to get the parts out of the plastic, what I like to do, again, any of this that I'm showing you, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the correct way of doing it. But apparently, you need to get parts 1 and 2, evidently. Not always correct, so always double check the actual manual. I'm going to grab the sprue. I'm kind of going to grab the part a little bit as well, and I'm going to snip, good snips, as close as I can to the contact points. Now that's got a bit of a lip on it. Always check your pictures when it comes to the plastics, but also check the pictures when it comes to anything else, really. And we're going to clip that off as best we possibly can. We're going to have a look for mold lines, because there is some there on his foot. And we're going to try and make sure that that clip that we've done is as flat as anything as we can get. The plastic is a softer material, so I'm getting the 320 grade. And I'm just going to kind of across. Now what I like to do once I've gone across with the 320 grades, I get the really thin item and kind of just try and smooth it off a bit, just to make sure that we are not ruining any of that detail on the actual model itself. Although this particular contact point, it doesn't really matter with that one. Making sure that the legs are, where the hell did I cut that one off? Oh right, it's underneath his foot. There we are. Now you could go to a lower grade if you wanted to. Sometimes, you know, you could just instantly go straight in with the 1200. It'd take you a while to file it down properly, but it does kind of, it does give you a smoother transition. Doesn't show when you're actually spray painting. I need a bit more rough stuff. So quite a bit of prep, as it were, to try and get that ready. However, when it comes to gluing it, I know I'm looking at legs. This is not the most exciting video at the moment. I'm going to be using this. So this is professional kind of like plastic glue. I'm hoping it's going to work. Sometimes these nozzles, when it's the metal ones, I really like them, but they can get blogged up quite easily. No, we've got movement and form. So I'm going to put some of that glue on one side. We're going to wait for it to activate properly. So we're going to kind of give it a minute. And then we're going to push it together. Now, if you want to, you can always gather so many parts together to then assemble together while you're waiting. I'm just going to stick those together now, because of course it's his trousers. Still going to fall over. Yeah, right. So let's clip the rest of it out. Now, sometimes when you're assembling a model, you can see the join lines. What I've done here with the join lines, I've just put a little bit of excess plastic glue on, just to try and fill out the join line itself. You can use sprue glue, which is where somebody takes the plastic glue and then submits lots and lots of sprues into it. I much prefer just to kind of like use some green stuff if I possibly can. I think I've still got some green stuff left, and I'll even kind of use this method and then kind of file it down a little bit just to make sure that it's actually looking all right. That's all right. Glue, right. Now, a little thing about plastic mold lines. So on plastic models, you can get, if you can just see that there, you can sometimes see the join between the two of the pieces. You will get that on metal models as well, but it's more evident with plastic because of the way the plastic is made, but not in that monopause like way. So sometimes you can actually see some of what's happening. If you take the back of a craft knife, if you scrape against it, you will actually get rid of those mold lines. Now you can do that before you assemble it together. Depends on whether or not I wouldn't have got a very good purchase there, so I'm just kind of using it. And you can see from the edge of the blade there, we are taking a little bit of plastic off. And we're just smoothing it out, making sure we've got no mold lines between the models. We can do it if it's quite stubborn, you can do it that way around, but if you're not careful, you can end up shaving quite a lot of the model off. So I personally wouldn't bother doing that. I would just try and use the back of the craft knife while doing your mold lines. So Plastic Yarrick is now assembled. I'm not stuck into his base yet, because what I want is to paint the base and the underskirt separately. Sometimes I don't bother with the underskirt because it's quite difficult to get hold of, but if I can actually get underneath the model, then it just makes it very easy to do. I'll probably end up putting a bit of a pin in his leg, and then of course putting that onto one of these little, just to be able to make sure that I can paint it. But the plastic glue is set quite nicely. A lot of, I know I don't want to use the word push fit, but it is quite push fit. Oddly, he is the same size as his previous counterpart, so if you put him on the same base, it is not much bigger. He's still the old man, so that's pretty good. I wonder if he's still the old man compared to his, yeah, he's about the same height as his original metal model. So that is all ready except one area. If you have a look inside the bolter there, there's no hole. Now, there is different theories on this. I am a drill your bolt holes. Bolt holes. You know, drill your gun barrels. That's what I actually quite like to do. I've got, this is a very old, I mean, look how Citadel. It's incredibly old drill bit, and if I can't remember how many mil. I think it's 0.2. Not 0.2. I think it's like a 2 mil sort of drill bit. I'll find out for you and put it on the actual screen. But this is the one that I use to drill the holes in. Now, I actually prefer to have the model fully assembled before I actually do any drill bits, because if you don't need to do them, and you don't need to do them. On here, they're kind of recessed already, but I'm just going to accentuate the piece, because I don't want, yeah, I just think it just looks better. It really does. There we go. See, it looks like a pig's nose now. Yeah. That's not going to look great because of the way the Finecast was. On the metal, you are going to struggle because you need to kind of get down to there, but then there's that in the way. So I might have to figure out a different way to do it. On the plastic, simple case of just holding it steady, holding it still, getting your piece, making sure that you believe you are as close as you can to what you need it to be, and then just apply a little pressure and drill. Don't do too much, because sometimes when you're doing these holes, you will get, I bet that's off. Oh dear. You will, no, that's fine. You will sometimes get it where you're drilling too far, and then when you're drilling too far, it's gone. You end up pushing right through, and you can actually hurt yourself doing that. I once actually pierced my own thumb going too far drilling barrels. I'm not going to bother going it that way because it's just way too short, but that way is fine. Just need to figure out a way to do a metal one. And there we go. Just 3 little bits of, just 3 very easy tips. If you're already an expert in these, you don't need these particular tips, but for just 3 quick and easy tips on how to get through and assemble these models. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button for more, and we'll see you in the next video.